What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Team Member Perspective podcast show. I'm your host, Colter, and in today's episode, we're going to cover pivoting, how to pivot effectively in a way to where we can set ourselves up to have a convincing conversation with our customers. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the Team Member Perspective group and a poll that I ran in one of our meetings. And this is why I wanted to talk about pivoting, because I did a question in a poll a few weeks back. So the question was, at what point in the conversation with your customer are you getting the majority of your objections when you're talking about life insurance? So that was a question I asked. And I had answers of right after my pivot, during my sales presentation, or after the close. I think were the three answers. There might have been another one. More than 50%, so more than half of the group said it was immediately right after the objection. Crazy. That's great information to know. So when we're pivoting to life insurance with our customers, the majority of our objections are coming in immediately after our pivot. And so I wanted to talk about that today and provide a few tips of how we can, number one, prevent that objection from happening in the first place. But number two, of how we can start to overcome those objections right after our pivots. Because right now, we're in the heart of a life insurance promotion, and it's to hit the highest tier. We've got to be on our A game. We've got to have conversations. We've got to pivot a lot, but we've got to pivot effectively. Okay. And so if we zoom out for a minute and talk about what it takes to sell any sort of line of insurance consistently at a high level, but we're going to stick to specifically life insurance for this example. What activities get us closer to selling more life insurance? Okay. And so we're going to talk through that. But one of the first things that we need to do if we want to sell more life insurance, one of the very first things that we need to do is we need to bring it up with our customers, and we need to bring it up consistently. We need to bring it up a lot, right? If you're not bringing up life insurance, but you want to sell more life insurance, that's your first step. Okay. Now, 90% of team members that approach me and say, "Hey, Colter, I want to sell more life insurance." And we get into a conversation with them and I start asking them questions. One of the first questions that I will ask is, how many times per week are you bringing up life insurance with your customers? More than 90% of team members will answer that question with a very low number. And my response to them is, hey, the first thing that you need to do, if you want to start selling more, you need to bring it up more. Okay, so the first step, if you want to sell more life insurance, you need to start talking about it more with your customers. Sounds very simple, right? But it's very true. And in my experience working with different agencies and different team members over the years, this is the number one reason why team members are not selling like they want to. They're just not simply bringing it up enough. Okay, so that's the first step. Within this promotion, I know you're pivoting. We're pivoting a lot. It's ingrained into us. Hey, we need to pivot. We've got to hit this life insurance promotion. So let's pivot. Every single service call, treat it as an opportunity. Every single outbound call, bring up life insurance. Ask them where it's at. Okay. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. That needs to stay at the front. That needs to be a focus if we're wanting to hit this promotion. Okay. So we need to bring it up with our customers consistently. Okay. The second thing with pivoting is we need to learn how to pivot effectively, right? Because if we're pivoting a lot and we're bringing it up a lot, we also want to make sure that we're working smart and so that we're pivoting effectively. Okay. And so thinking about I would encourage you, right? What are your go-to pivots? Now think to yourself how effective they are. Like, when you pivot, are you able to get into a conversation with your customer, or are you getting objections right away, right after that pivot, right? Think about where you're getting objections in the first place, but think about in regards to pivoting, how effective you feel like your pivots are. Okay. We're going to talk about a few different tips, a few different things that you can implement to start to pivot more effectively. And this is all from my experience, from what I have learned over the last 6 years working in the multi-line space, of how I've been able to pivot more effectively. So to illustrate how this has kind of been an important part of my journey, I want to take you through my story a little bit. So before I got into the insurance space, I was a door-to-door salesman, and that was my first experience with any sort of sales position. And I remember my first summer, in fact, my first week, I was put in an area with my iPad, nothing else. I was dropped off, and I had an area that I was going to work. Mind you, I didn't really know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to deal with rejection. I didn't know how to sell. And so it was an uncomfortable position for me to be in. But I remember my first week very vividly, because my first few days when I was knocking on people's doors, I was getting rejection. I was getting doors slammed in my face, and I honestly wasn't really ever able to have a sales presentation. And that was my first 3 days knocking doors. And so, as you could imagine, I was getting discouraged. And many times during that first week, I had thoughts of, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe I just can't sell, right? And it was a tough place to be mentally. And so I was bouncing back and forth. Should I just go home? Am I wasting my time? Or should I try to stick this thing out? And I remember, thinking to myself, I committed to come out here. So let's actually try to figure this thing out. So I recommitted to training, and I started to analyze, my door approach, meaning I'd knock on their door. What was I saying next? What response was I getting from people out, at their homes? And so I did an analysis. I started to figure out, and I came to the conclusion that my door approach just wasn't working. And so I committed to training, and I committed to making a few adjustments to that door approach. Okay. And so the door approach in the door-to-door industry it has the same purpose as the pivot in the insurance industry. Okay. And so I tweaked my door approach, and sure enough, I started to get people to listen to me. I started to get into sales presentations with my customers, or with people, that I was trying to sell these security systems to. And as I started to have sales presentations where I'd help them understand, like, look, here's a problem that you face. Here's your solution. Here are your benefits. Why would this security system be something that you want to get, right? What would it do for you? How would it change your life? Really just sell them, right? And, as I started to do more of those sales presentations, that first week, I ended with, I believe, 5 accounts, which as a rookie, as a first time, as my first year, it was a big deal, big accomplishment for me. But those first 3 days were rough. I wasn't getting anywhere. I wasn't getting into a sales presentation, because I was just getting stuck on the door, and I couldn't get past those initial objections. But when I went and I committed, and I made some adjustments to that door approach, I started to get into a sales presentation, which resulted in me selling those accounts. Okay. And so I think of that experience, and I've applied it to the position in the agency, right? We're pivoting all of the time with our customers, all of the time. But how effective are our pivots? You need to ask yourself that question. Okay. And if you feel that they aren't effective, right? And the way that you would know that they're not effective is that you're getting those objections right away, and you're not able to get into a sales presentation. If you found that they're not effective, I'm going to share some tips that I think will help tweak that pivot so you can start getting past those initial objections. Okay. But as far as pivoting, guys, we need to pivot a lot, right? We need to have that consistent activity, and we need to have effective pivots. Okay. If we can do both of those things, we're going to hit this promotion and we're going to become very consistent in what we do. Okay. So now, if we go back to when I first started in insurance, I had the mindset that I was going to crush it. I know how to sell. I know how to, I know how to deal with rejection, and I'm not afraid to talk to people. So I get into insurance, start quoting a lot of P&C, but any moment that I would pivot to, say, life insurance or any sort of health insurance product, I would get those initial objections. Became very frustrating, right? And I was talking to a lot of customers. I was pivoting as often as I could, right? Because I had that mindset. I was a door-to-door guy to where out there, I would knock on people's doors until I got a sell, right? That's just how I work. I work really hard. And so I do that when I start in insurance. I literally am pivoting to every single customer that I can, asking them about their life insurance. Where's your life insurance at? What life insurance plan do you have in place? Life insurance, life insurance, life insurance, life insurance, right? I was talking to a lot of people, but I was not closing policies. In fact, I wasn't even able to get into a sales presentation to where I could help them see the problem, the solution, and the benefits, the reasons of what will actually get them to buy this thing or see if it's even a good fit for them, right? I wasn't even able to get to there at that point in the conversation because my customers, my prospects, they were getting stuck on what life insurance is. I could never get to tell them about what it does to them because they were stuck on what it is. So I remember getting discouraged, and in my mind, it was a lot of time, it was a lot of energy, and it affected me throughout the day because, I would pivot a lot, I would talk a lot about life insurance, but I'd never close the deal. And I'd never even get into a good conversation with my customers because they'd stop me. And so I got discouraged. And I stopped, honestly, talking to my customers about life insurance for the longest time. Because in my mind, I thought, why would I go and have another conversation with a customer just to more than likely get told no? And so I was in an interesting spot. But I remember, time went on. Our agency joined this kind of accountability group to where we would share our production every single month, and it became a leaderboard. And I remember that's when I recommitted to actually figuring out how I could start to sell more life insurance. I knew that it was a point in my insurance career that this needed to be figured out. So I recommitted to training. Again, I did what I did in the door-to-door space. I thought about my pivots to life insurance, and I started to talk to my customers and get those initial objections. But I realized that I was getting them right after my pivot. And I realized one thing that was very interesting to me, that I was getting those objections right after I'd pivot, right? So I'd say, hey, so-and-so, tell me about your life insurance. And what I realized is that life insurance was this trigger word for my customers. And, throughout my pivot, the moment that I'd say life insurance, my customer would immediately connect the dots in their mind to something that they had believed about life insurance, which was typically, Colter, I've got it through work. I'm good. Tell me about your life insurance. Oh, I don't need life insurance. I'm good. Right? And so I started to realize that life insurance was this trigger word that kind of completely that's what was stopping the progression of the conversation, is that customers and people, and this is what I realized, customers and people have beliefs that whether or not these beliefs are 100% true, they still have these beliefs about life insurance. Okay? And because they have these beliefs about life insurance, anytime they'd hear the words life insurance, they go to a decision they've already made in their mind about life insurance, right? Which is typically, oh, life insurance, I've got it through work, I'm good, right? Or, oh, I don't need that. Too expensive, I can't afford it, right? So they had these beliefs that they created, and that's where they'd go, right? And I remember trying to overcome these objections And I would explain to the customer, like, that's great that you have that through work, good for you, but can you take it into retirement? Do you know if you can do that? Do you know that this policy is something you cannot control? It's in the control of your employer. At any point in time, they could stop offering those benefits and you're stuck without life insurance, right? So I try to overcome all of these objections in the ways that I had been taught, and I still wouldn't get anywhere with my customers. So frustrating, right? And so I'd overcome those objections, and the customer would say, okay, yeah, no, I'm good, right? And it's just very frustrating. So I realized that life insurance, disability insurance, these words were trigger words and would cause the customer to go to one of those objections. And when they go to one of those objections, I literally would see this, imaginary wall come down between me and the prospect or the customer. And no matter what I said, I just felt like the customer just wasn't listening to me, right? Because in their mind, they'd think, you know what? I've got life insurance through work. I'm good. So they'd almost check that box off. And no matter what I said, they weren't listening to me. Okay. So it became very frustrating, right? But that's what I realized, as I committed to training, as I committed to analyzing what I was doing and trying to figure out what wasn't working, why it wasn't, I realized that our customers have beliefs about life insurance, about disability insurance, that whether or not they're true, they still have them. So when they hear life insurance, when they hear disability insurance, they go to those beliefs and they almost check off this box in their mind that they're good, that they're already taken care of, or that they don't need it. Okay. So I realized that. So I committed to go and make some changes to that initial pivot because that's where I was getting hung up. And so I started to leave the words life insurance, the words disability out in my pivot. I started to leave them out. Okay. But instead, I started to tell them and talk to them about what life insurance does for them, what disability insurance does for them, rather than so much on what it is. For example, instead of saying, hey, Mr. Customer, tell me about your life insurance, I would say, hey, Mr. Customer, tell me about the coverage you have in place to replace your income if you were to pass away prematurely. Okay? Hey, Mr. Customer, I'm going to quote you a coverage. I'm going to quote you a benefit that will pay off your home if you were to pass away prematurely. Okay? And so that's how I started to tweak my pivots. I left out those words because that's where my customers were getting hung up, right? And they go to those beliefs. And when they go to those beliefs, here comes this wall. And no matter what I'm saying, I can't really get through to my customer. And because I couldn't get through to my customer, guess what? I couldn't get into a sales presentation. I couldn't help them see that, look, this is a potential problem or risk that you face by not having life insurance. Okay? The solution to that is, look, I can help you get this coverage in place so that that problem's solved, right? And then what are the benefits, right? Why is it important for Mr. Customer to get a policy in place, right? How will his life change? So I was able to start to get into that conversation of the problem, the solution, the benefits when I made those adjustments to my pivot. It was insane, right? And that is the moment that my production changed. I went from selling maybe 10 to 15 life apps a year when I was getting those objections up front and, using that old way of pivoting for myself. And the next year I wrote 123 life apps. The following, I wrote 231. And then this most recent year, I wrote 251 life apps, which has been crazy, right? But it didn't always start that way. And one of the biggest lever movers for me that took my production from 10 a year to over 200 a year was learning how to pivot effectively. Okay. I had been pivoting enough. I knew that. I was talking to a lot of people, but I still wasn't getting results. And so I knew I needed to make adjustments to my pivot itself. I needed to learn how to pivot more effectively. Okay. And that made all of the difference. Okay. So what is it that we can do to start to pivot more effectively? Well, the first thing that I think, and the first tip that I would start to implement, or at least try out for yourself, is to leave out the words life insurance, leave out disability insurance, and talk to your customers about what life insurance does for them and not so much about what it is. We can get to what it is, but we first need to help our customers see what it does for them. So in your pivot, find a way to leave out the words life insurance, disability insurance, and instead go to more of a pivot about what it does for you, right? Tell me about the coverage you have in place to replace your income, right? To pay for a funeral, to pay this loan off that you just got on your vehicle, to pay off your mortgage, right? That's what I mean. And then follow it up with benefits, right? And that's something that I've done within my pivots, right? Of, okay, hey, Mr. Customer, tell me what coverage you have in place to pay this loan off for the vehicle that you just got. Here come the benefits, okay? That way your family doesn't have to deal with this debt, struggle to make this monthly payment while trying to deal with losing you, and that they can just keep the car, right? All of a sudden that pivot, it's like it paints more of a picture for the customer and helps him start to think about what life insurance does, start to think about the problem or the risk that they face by not having anything. Me telling them, hey, we've got a solution, and we finish with the benefits, right? And so tweak your pivot in that way, and you're going to start to get further with your customers. You're going to have those convincing conversations. And the best part is you're going to get past that initial objection right after your pivot. Okay. So talk to your customers about what life insurance does for them, not so much on what it is, especially early on in your pivot. Okay. The second tip that I would give you as far as pivoting is find a way to make your pivot very natural and very logical, right? Make that transition, because if we think about a pivot, guys, right? What's the purpose of a pivot? Ask yourself, what is the purpose of a pivot? For me, the purpose of the pivot is to set myself up for the sales presentation, to position myself in a way to have a convincing sales presentation. Okay. And so, especially in the multi-line space, right? If we're pivoting, we're changing directions, right? So the second tip is, how can you change directions in a very natural and logical way rather than, just a harsh redirection, right? Find a way to pivot in a very natural and seamless way, not in a harsh way. Okay. For example, the way we can do that is, let's say that you just took a payment for a customer that you see that they have a loan on their vehicle, right? You've recognized a life insurance opportunity to pay off that vehicle with a life policy. Okay, so you've recognized that, but now how do you pivot? How do you make that pivot natural and seamless and logical so you can get into a life insurance conversation from a payment, right? How can you do that? And so keep it, I guess cut that out. So the way to do that, guys, is to, if you're going to talk about life insurance to pay the loan off, maybe the first thing to make it natural and logical and an easy transition is to talk about that loan, bring up that loan, confirm that we have the right loan, the right bank on file. That's what I like to do. Say, hey, Mr. Customer, I noticed you have a loan on your 2023 Toyota Tacoma. I noticed that you have that through ABC Bank. Is that still correct? Okay. Now all of a sudden I'm set up for a natural pivot where we're talking about the loan. Now we can talk about life insurance to pay that loan off. It becomes very natural and logical in that transition. Okay. That's the second step. And the third tip, and this is more of just awareness, is timing. Okay. This is something I think it's overlooked by far too many agents, team members, but it's timing, right? And, as team members, like I've said earlier, it's ingrained into us to pivot. We know we need to pivot, right? And sometimes we'll pivot even when we know the timing's not right. Okay, so let's talk about the timing, because I think there's two parts to this timing that we can start to develop awareness around that will help us pivot more effectively. So if you're talking with a customer, right, we're in the middle of this life promotion, you're talking with a customer about changing their address, and we know we need to pivot. But when you're on the phone with them, you sense urgency in their voice, and it's almost like they just want you to change the address and get done. Like they're busy, they've got a lot going on. You can sense that in their voice. So how is timing with that pivot, right? If the customer's ready to get off the phone and they're rushed, how effective do you feel like it would be to pivot to life insurance? Okay. Personally, I don't feel like it would be very effective at all, because guess what? Odds are they're probably not going to listen, or odds are they've got so much going on right now that it's easy for them to just tell you no. Okay. But here's the deal. You've recognized an opportunity to pivot. So I think a misconception that we have is that if we don't pivot right then and there, that opportunity is lost. Okay. But I want you guys to ask yourself that question. Think about that situation, right? The customer changes their address. You notice that they have a loan on their vehicle and you want to bring up life insurance to pay that loan off. So the opportunity's there, but the timing just doesn't seem right for them. They seem a little rushed. How effective would it be for you to pivot right there? How do you feel like that would go? Okay. Now, for me, I just don't feel like it would be that effective. I feel like I'd be wasting a pivot. I'd be wasting my energy, but I've recognized that opportunity. So if I don't pivot right then and there, is that opportunity actually gone? The answer to that is no. Okay. And what you can do is you can actually just call them back. Okay. That's the beauty, right? It's not lost. But for this to work, just let the customer know that you're going to be calling them back, right? Pre-sell that callback. And the way that I like to do that is with this simple phrase. I like to say, hey, Mr. Customer, I'll get that address changed for you. And by the way, it looks like it's been a minute since we've looked through your policies, kind of did a review. And I know you're busy, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through your policies, comb through them for any potential discounts that you might be missing out on, as well as any potential gaps in coverage. If I see anything, I'm just going to shoot you a call. Is that okay? Okay. So if the timing is not right for your prospect, you feel that they're just rushed, pre-sell that callback. And then you can call them back at a time that, they're not so rushed and that their mindset, their headspace is a little bit better, to where you can actually have an effective pivot, and one where your customer actually listens to you. And you'll be able to close more policies that way. So the third piece is timing, right? The timing is not right for your customer, but you've recognized that opportunity. Don't feel like you have to pivot right then and there. Just pre-sell that callback and call them back. Now, obviously for this to work, you have to actually call them back. You can't just say, oh, I recognize the opportunity. Good. No, I recognize the opportunity. I'm putting their name down at, later this afternoon, I'm going to call them back, right? Or I'm going to go look through their account. And at that point, go and look through their account. Find any sort of leverage that you can find for that conversation, call them back, and that will be much more of an effective pivot where your customers probably in a better position will listen to you because they don't feel so rushed, to where you can actually help them see what life insurance will do for them in their specific situation. Okay. So we talked about timing for a prospect. It's important, but guess what? Timing for us is equally as important. We are in a sales position, which means our days look something like this: roller coaster, right? There's a roller coaster of emotions with what we do. Maybe you get to work and you're gung-ho, you're excited, you're motivated, you're ready to attack the day, and you start get going, you're making a lot of phone calls, pivoting a lot, you're crushing it. But then you have a customer come in asking about their bill, and he gets nasty with you. And, after he leaves, it kind of affects you a little bit. And, you don't feel like you are, at your best like you were just moments before he came in. And so, guys, we're human too. It's a roller coaster of emotion. And we aren't always going to be at our best. And sometimes we're going to have to figure out how we can bounce back, right? But it's a roller coaster of emotion. And so if you recognize an opportunity, but you just don't feel like you're at your best because you just had a nasty customer, right? Maybe you just don't feel confident. Maybe, it's just not the right timing for you, whatever that means, right? Instead of feeling like you have to pivot right there or the opportunity's gone, pre-sell the callback. Call them back at a time when you are at a better spot with yourself, right? So timing is important, not only for our customers, timing for them, but also for us, okay? So start to develop awareness around that timing, and you're going to have much more effective conversations, right? And you're going to be able to write more policies, okay? So that's what I wanted to talk about. I know, we're all pivoting. We're talking a lot about life insurance. Keep doing that. I firmly believe that bringing up life insurance is much, much better than not bringing it up at all. However, I think if we can start bringing it up consistently. Now it's a matter of how can we be more effective with our pivots, right? And what we've talked about today, that's what I've done. That's what I do every single day. And it's allowed me to stay consistently writing over 200 life apps a year, over 100 health apps a year, which has been absolutely awesome. So I appreciate you guys. Keep crushing this promo. Go have conversation with your customers. Remember what you're doing, the impact that you're having, and let's go have an amazing rest of this promotion. Let's crush it, and we will see you guys next time.